WLRN Edition 92. Broadcasting in 3, 2, 1.
I was born woman. Off my knees I will stand for my liberation. Sisters, rise again. I was born woman. Off my knees I will stand for my liberation. Rise and rise again.
Greetings and welcome to the 92nd edition podcast of Women's Liberation Radio News for this Thursday, December 7th, 2023. This is Mary. This month's edition focuses on the war in the Middle East and its impacts on women and children. We'll hear an excerpt of an interview Thistle conducted with Cindy Sheehan, a left-wing anti-war activist who was instrumental in the peace movement during the Iraq War. I will also provide commentary at the end of the show that reflects on the current crisis in Israel and Gaza, providing a brief overview of the history of the conflict. The team at WLRN produces a monthly radio broadcast to break the sound barrier women are blocked by under the status quo rule of men. This blocking of women's discourse we see in all sectors of society, be they conservative, liberal, mainstream, progressive, or radical. The thread that runs through all of American politics, except for separatist feminism, is male dominance and entitlement in all spheres. To start off today's edition, here's Kathleen Miles sitting in for me this month with women's news from around the globe for this Thursday, December 7th, 2023. Take it away, Kathleen.
On Wednesday, November 1st, between 50 and 100 students walked out of the Woodgrove High School in Loudoun County, Virginia, to protest a Loudoun County School Board policy allowing students to use the bathrooms and locker rooms that align with their chosen gender identities. The policy was adopted in 2021 by a 7-2 vote of the Loudoun County School Board. Now the policy is facing backlash from students, some of whom want to see the policy reversed. A female student interviewed by ABC 7 News said of the policy, "It's a massive safety risk, and they, the Loudoun County Public Schools, don't do anything about it. And we express these concerns, and they ignore us and write us off as right-wing crazies. We're not crazy. We just don't want to be in danger on a daily basis in this building." She assured ABC 7 News that she is not alone and that half of the women in the building feel the same way, even going so far as to refrain from using the bathrooms. According to ABC 7 News, Woodgrove High School students were discouraged from speaking out by their teachers. When asked if the policy would be reversed, the Loudoun County School Board said that the policy is in review from the Student Services Committee, and they will continue with the prescribed review process. Al-Adha Hospital is the only hospital still in operation in the northern area of Gaza, and as of November 13th, they have run out of fuel. The hospital is also without anesthetic and other essential medical supplies. Despite these shortages, hospital staff continue to treat their patients, 80% of whom are women and children. They've continued to perform life-saving procedures such as C-sections. Over the weekend of November 11th and 12th, 16 C-sections were performed, and between 18 and 20 babies were delivered each day. In Gaza, more than 135 health facilities have been targeted by Israel, and all are faced with a lack of fuel and supplies. There were 50,000 pregnant Palestinian women under siege as of November 13th. On Friday, November 24th, a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas began. The terms of the ceasefire included the release of at least 50 Israeli women and children hostages in exchange for the release of 150 Palestinian prisoners, of whom were all women and children. Hamas released a group of 24 hostages on Friday night, and in the exchanges since, a total of 69 hostages taken in the October 7th attacks have been released, with 50 of those being Israeli and 19 of other nationalities. By the end of the Monday swap, it is expected that a total of 150 Palestinian prisoners will have been freed. Israel has stated that it will continue to extend the temporary truce between Palestine and Israel an extra day for every 10 additional hostages released. Hamas agreed to a 2-day extension, and the ceasefire was extended to last at least until 2 days past Monday, November 27th. The hope of many is that this will allow for more humanitarian aid to enter the Gaza Strip, which has been devastated by the Israeli bombardment and ground offensive. On October 30th, President Xi Jinping of China made a speech addressing his concerns about China's declining population. He called for the All China Women's Federation, a government-led institution, to, in his words, actively cultivate a new marriage and childbirth culture, strengthen guidance of young people's views on marriage, parenthood, and family, as well as promote policies to support childbirth. At the same event in 2018, President Xi called on the All China Women's Federation to help women better deal with the relationship between family and work. And back in 2013, he spoke about the need for women to be good wives and mothers for the sake of the next generation. This most recent call for a return of women to domestic roles comes on the heels of a leadership change last year, which saw women excluded from China's Politburo. On November 8th, Ohio voted to protect the right to abortion under the state constitution. The state legislature could still ban abortion after the fetus becomes viable, at around 23 weeks, with exceptions made if the treating physician considers abortion necessary for the patient's health or life. The UN warns that the violence against civilians in Sudan, which broke out last April, is verging on pure evil. Since April, those loyal to de facto head of state Abdel Fattah al-Burhan have been fighting the paramilitary forces of the Rapid Support Forces. This conflict has resulted in numerous atrocities, including young girls being raped in front of their mothers, and armed militias going house to house shooting boys and men. According to conservative estimates from the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, over 10,000 people have been killed in the conflict, while the UN reports that 4.8 million have been displaced. The Hollywood Branch Library in Northeast Portland closed on Sunday, November 19th, after a crowd gathered to protest a scheduled event set to be held in one of the library's meeting rooms. The event was to be held by Women's Declaration International USA, who described the gathering as a peaceful speaking event addressing the preservation of sex-based rights for women and girls. However, posts circulated online calling for protest against what some see as transphobic rhetoric. The night before the event, the library was vandalized with graffiti, which said things like, "TERFs out of PDX." On November 19th, protesters lined up on the sidewalk and surrounded the entrance to the library. WDI USA claims that they were informed by the head of county security and the library president that library staff were being menaced by members of the crowd, and that the women were then asked to consider canceling their event. Out of consideration for library staff and patrons, the women stated that they chose to move their event to the street, and that violence then ensued halfway into the first speech. In their online statement, WDI USA reports that cans were thrown at the women, chemicals sprayed in their faces, women punched and kicked, and phones and cameras ripped off of their bodies. Redux and WDI USA report that numerous 911 phone calls were made without police response. On November 4th, Aaron Jackson, speed skater, roller derby player, and Olympic gold medalist for the United States, took gold in the Pan American Games Santiago for the 500-meter and inline skating. Aaron is no stranger to success. In 2015, she took silver in the Pan American Games in Toronto for the 500-meter inline speed skating event, and she is the 500-meter national record holder. Aaron also holds many accolades in ice speed skating, including a gold medal in the 2022 Olympic Winter Games. Prior to her recent win in the Pan American Games, Aaron expressed excitement for the competition. She said, "I feel like it's been so long since I've been able to go to the Pan Am Games. I'm just excited. It was a really good time last time I was there." That concludes WLRN's World News segment for Thursday, December 7th. I'm Kathleen. Share your news stories, announcements, and tips with us by emailing info@WLRNmedia.com and let us know what's going on.
רכישת רוח ים מנשבת מי שם וכביסה מתנפנפת לצילי החומה. بين الأرض والسماء ناس كتير بعيشوا سوا، ما تخافوا تحلموا بالسلام والأمان. متى يمسوا خمات بخر ושבתי מגלותי, יפתחו שעריי אל הטוב האמיתי.
I want to thank you for standing up for peace alongside your Palestinian sisters. I want to thank you and to let you know that in the world that we live in, peace is possible only when women of integrity and faith stand up for the future of their children. Congratulations. It is my hope that you will continue to battle for peace in a constructive way, and I look forward to the day that I will come and join you. Thank you for the children of Israel. Thank you for the children of Palestine. Thank you. Peace. Shalom.
From the north to the south, from the west to the east, hear the prayer of the mothers. Bring them peace, bring them peace. From the north to the south, from the west.
That was Yael Deckelbaum with her song Prayer of the Mothers, a song she wrote for the March of Hope that took place in 2016. Lubna Salame, Miriam Tukan, and Danielle Rubin are also featured singers in the song. 4,000 women, half Palestinians and half Israelis, marched from the north of Israel to Jerusalem to demonstrate for peace in 2016. The march culminated on October 19th with 15,000 women demonstrating in front of Israel's Prime Minister's house, calling for a ceasefire. Next up, we'll hear excerpts of an interview Emily and I did with Cindy Sheehan last weekend about the war in the Middle East and its impacts on women. Cindy is a longtime anti-war activist who lost her son to the Iraq War in 2004. She has blazed a trail of militant anti-war activism and criticism of the USA's war-based economy ever since. You can find her work at cindysheehan.substack.com. I started the interview by asking her which lens she uses to analyze war. Take a listen.
Well, at the very base of it, war is absolute, 100% unequivocal barbarism. There should be no mass killing of human beings, whether they're innocent civilians or troops. Like, many troops are also, even though they've been trained in this, we have to look at that through a different lens too, because here in the United States, we know that many of our young people who are in the poor working classes, and my son included, who was killed in Iraq as a member of the U.S. Army over 20 years, almost 20 years ago now, on April 4th. I can't believe that some days it feels like 20 minutes and some days it feels like, a lot longer. But so I look at it through that lens, is that, I mean, if my son was wrong for joining the military to get college benefits and to what he was promised by his recruiter, he joined in the year 2000, then why do I have to suffer because of war? Why does his family, his siblings, his father, his friends, why are we suffering? It's because war is barbaric, and nobody should take our young people, and I would think that most parents raise their children to resolve differences nonviolently. But then, because of economic circumstances or whatever, there's probably a lot of U.S. troops that enjoy what they're doing, but that wasn't the case for my son. And so train them to be cold-blooded killers. And in the case of Israel and Palestine, then we have troops that are indentured. They have to serve. Everybody in Israel serves. And so I just look at it through that lens, is that it is an absolutely barbaric thing that humans have been doing to each other since time began. But when is the human race going to grow up and, say that war is ridiculous? And it's not even to resolve conflicts. It's to actually enrich people for power, for resource control, to enrich the 1% who are already rich, to further enrich them, to impoverish the rest of us, and to put mothers like me into lifelong grief. That's kind of the lens I look at it through.
Okay, yeah. That was quite an answer, and this is why you're anti-war. You're not just a peace activist. You're against war because it impacts more than just the soldiers. It impacts the families of the soldiers. It impacts the civilians, innocent civilians, especially in this Israeli-Hamas conflict. We're seeing so many civilians who are being slaughtered, which is just, I can't even imagine the trauma that all these people are going through. Emily, do you want to jump in there at all, or we can go on to the next?
I mean, I really agree with what Cindy is saying, that especially like what you're saying about a lot of the times, I think in discourse around war, there's a villainizing of soldiers as the enforcers of what's happening. And it's true what you're saying, like the young men who are signing up to go to these wars, the vast majority of them, I don't think, are doing it because they, want to kill or are cold-blooded killers. Maybe there's a small number of them that are like that, but it's this war machine of powerful, rich men who want things and are willing to kill innocent people, whether they're young men that signed up to fight or women that are just living in a place that becomes a conflict space. It's the male war machine churning on and making a mess for everybody else.
Yeah. So That's so depressing to think about.
Yeah.
I wish that we collectively, and I truly believe this, that if the majority of the politicians and the people in charge of major powers in the world, if women were in charge, I don't think we would see this type of bloodshed, at least as extremely as we see it. I don't know what you think about that, Cindy.
Well, I think if the women who are in charge were in charge, if there were women like Hillary Clinton and Condoleezza Rice, then there'd be, much more bloodshed, I think. I think Hillary Clinton is a vicious war criminal. She's a warmonger, and, she has proven that over and over again. So I guess it would be, I don't really look at it, as a Democrat, Republican, woman, female, male issue. I look at it as an imperialistic issue. For somebody to raise as to the top as high as Hillary Clinton has gotten, or, other vicious warmongering women like Nikki Haley or Liz Cheney. I could go on and on and on, but I can only be here an hour. I could go for an hour just listening to war criminals. It's more of a systemic problem. So you have to almost, even for people of color or LGBT people, if you get up to that kind of level, that means you have bought into the white male privilege paradigm. And you act like a white male. You don't represent your community. Barack Obama is a good example of that. And Hillary Clinton's a good example on the gender issue. So that's my feelings.
I totally agree with that. And I think that's why we need a woman-centered, female-centered, female-driven society, because women enlist in the patriarchy and help the patriarchy. Emily and I were talking about this the other day. Who binds the feet of the girls in China? It's their mothers.
Mm-hmm.
Often it's women who, like you said, can be some of the most bloodthirsty.
If women like us were in charge, things would be different.
Exactly.
That's not going to happen. I tried really hard to.
You tried very hard, and you did a good job down there in Crawford, Texas. Cindy Sheehan, you did a fantastic job, and you're still with us, and it's really great to be discussing this with you. I'm going to go on to the next question that we had, and that is, what is your understanding of the history of the conflict between Palestine and Israel, and in what ways does this current moment, this current situation, differentiate itself from the past?
Well, first of all, I don't really like the Hamas-Israeli conflict kind of meme or paradigm or talking point, because that presupposes that there's some kind of equality, that it's an equal fight. It's actually, and this is apt because it's in that part of the world, it's definitely a David and Goliath kind of thing, where Goliath is a big bully and David is using his sling and stones to try and defeat that. But the history of the Israeli-Palestine conflict goes back really not just to October 7th. It goes back to the late 1800s, where a Zionist movement started a homeland for Jews in Palestine. And then, of course, after the Holocaust, which was a horrific event, nobody is minimizing that. But also, what isn't talked about is that not only were Jews exterminated, but Catholics, socialists, gay people, gypsies, anybody where Hitler or the Germans thought were, harming the fatherland or the bloodline of the white, blonde, blue-eyed Germans. They were eliminated in that. And then after World War II, European Jews were granted land that wasn't anybody's right to give. People were already living there, and they were Palestinians, they were Christians, they were Jews, had been living in mostly harmony. Nobody lives in complete harmony ever. No community doesn't have its issues, doesn't have its struggles. But then literal terrorists came to chase Palestine, and even Jews and Christians were killed in this beginning. And so the Nakba happened. I don't know, something like 14,000 Palestinians were killed that were living in Jenin, I believe. And then the current bombardment, where we've seen many bombardments of Gaza since Israel put up the wall, the current one has killed more now than the Nakba did. And that about, I think, the last thing I heard, and they resumed, they had a brief pause, a timeout. Israel has resumed, but before the resumption, I believe like 20,000 Gazans had been killed, half of them children. And so I believe, now I have an extreme position on this. I realize that there are many, and I want to say there are many Jews who are not Zionists. There are many people of other faiths who are Zionists. Zionism means an extreme colonialism, and that there are people on both sides of the conflict. There are people, Israelis, who don't agree with what Israel is doing, and there's Jewish Voices for Peace. And there are young people in universities who are trying to speak up for the Palestinian people, and they're being told that, there would be a severe discipline if they didn't stop doing that, etc. And so my position is Israel is a colonial apartheid state, obviously. And colonialism, again, with war is barbarism, and this is a genocide. It's not a war. It's not a conflict. It's Goliath trying to exterminate David. And I think this time the international community, many of the people in the community are getting it right. They're saying that what's happening and what happened to Gaza even before October 7th was a crime against humanity. And they're calling for an end to it. And so I think that there's no two-state solution. It's a one-state solution. That's a Palestinian state. Go back to when it was Palestine. And if the European Jews who live there want to be integrated, what am I saying? I live in California. I'm trying to solve this conflict that people have gotten Nobel Peace Prizes for, but has not been resolved to this day.
No, that was great. You did a good, coverage. I think I think it's kind of just such an impossible situation. I feel like it was set up to be a perpetual conflict from the very beginning. The way, here's this land. We don't have the right to give it away or anything, but we are here. It's for you now. It's just such a ridiculous way to start off in a way that's going to be a conflict. I don't know that I feel the same way about you, right? Like, who am I to say what the solution should be or whatever? I don't feel like I have an idea of, I can't think of a solution that would work and that wouldn't continue to create conflict. I feel like that is why
it's like a festering wound. I mean, ever since I've been in high school, this has been, which is a long time ago in the 1980s, this has been a conflict that involves many horrible murders of innocent civilians on both sides. But I would agree, the number of Gazans, obviously, and Palestinians that have been killed, civilians, is much higher than on the Israeli side. I totally see that. But none of them, no innocent civilians on either side should be killed, and I, why is this a festering wound? And you said in your monologue, Cindy, that the Jews, in all these different groups did live in this region with basic harmony, not full harmony, before this 1948 thing started. Like, it was the UN that did that, right? I mean, why did they set it up the way that they set it up? Do you know?
Basically, I think that it's very difficult because I think the choice of Palestine for the European Jews who had been horribly oppressed during the Holocaust. And I actually wrote a piece on my Substack, Cindy Sheehan's Soapbox Substack. If people want to subscribe, it's free. I think that before that, though, there was this, like I said, this Zionist movement, and I think it was basically a racist movement because Europeans didn't want the Jews, living where they lived, and because you would think, to make sense of it all, Germany was the one that committed the Holocaust, so you would think that a piece of Germany would be carved out for the Jews, for a Jewish state. And but like, again, it's just really confusing. Is why do we need like a Jewish state? There's no other states that say I'm this religion state. Although and most of the Arabic countries, they are mostly Muslim, but they don't say we're a Muslim state. And so I think that, first of all, why was that even an issue?
I can answer that. I mean, I think coming out of the Holocaust, that's like the whole state of Israel is, Jews, Zionists, like reacting to the Holocaust. We need our own space. We need our own military. We need to be able to, congregate and defend ourselves. And, I hear what you're saying. Like, why can't Jewish people just I don't know, there's like more Jews living in New York City, I think. Right.
New York State, I know. And so they're definitely not really that much of an oppressed. There are people who have prejudices and things like that, and they always will. And I think the issue we have with this Free Palestine or pro-Palestine movement is that there's still those people. And when and then the Congress just equated being anti-Zionist with being anti-Semitic. Mm-hmm. Right. And so now we have even more of a challenge because I think there are people in the movement that don't like Jews or hate Jews. And I don't want to say that, I don't like to say anti-Semitic because that's another one of their words, because the Palestinian people are Semitic people. And I'm not against any people. I'm not against Jews. I'm against these like Netanyahu and those kind of people that are equating Palestinians with being animals and with being savages. And they say that they use their children as human shields or whatever. And that's what colonial powers have always said. That's what the white settlers from Europe said about our indigenous people. Mm-hmm. And so the problem is that there is some hatred for Jews. And I think that kind of puts this cast over the whole pro-Palestinian movement, is that they think that because they're very paranoid, and I understand the Holocaust was a horrible thing, and they do have a reason for some paranoia, but there's got to be a time when we've come into the 21st century and there's mostly no animosity towards Jews. In fact, they seem to be a protected, I don't even want to say minority, which is fine, which is great. But we have to understand that, like, we've talked about, is that there are people who have been born and died who are still, like you said, Thistle, a festering wound. Before World War I, if there were wars, combatants would actually go to battlefields or fight in open places, and very few civilians were killed. Now, how can in a place,
it's all terrorism.
Yeah, it's so crowded, how you can't avoid killing civilians. That's why war should be abolished.
Yeah,
war should be abolished. And I mean,
I know. I think one of the things that like festers this wound, like when I think about someone like Netanyahu, like his brother was killed in a terrorist attack, like in the 80s. You have, like, he's never gonna stop, right? Like someone who not only is like, I'm the defender of Israel and the Jewish people, he also is like, my brother was killed by a terrorist. So when you have like and I'm sure whoever is leading in Hamas is also has had these personal effects. Everyone has. And so it's like, yeah, you're someone like Netanyahu, like he's never going to back down. He's always going to be a warmonger, because he feels like he's going to kill all of Hamas because they killed his brother. And I feel like that is
very much a patriarchal way of operating.
And using human shields. I mean,
how much is religion a part of this? Because, it's a Zionist,
it's a big part of it.
Jewish religious state. And in Judaism, there's the concept of an eye for an eye, right? I mean, how much of that, isn't it? It's in the Old Testament, an eye for an eye is like a common, anyway. I'm coming from a Christian background, and I just remember learning that Jesus came and said, no, we're not going to practice an eye for an eye. We're going to practice forgiveness and
love thy neighbor.
And love thy neighbor instead of an eye for an eye. And so I'm just saying, like, how much is, religion involved in this conflict? I'm sure that's a huge can of worms.
I know. Religion there's no way to take religion out of it, right? Because that's why the Jewish people are like the Zionists of the Jewish people feel the entitlement to the land of Israel, because it's the ancestral, it's where like
it's the Holy Land.
It's where the story took place. It's where the Bible took place or whatever. Like it's where the book happened. And so, and like every Christianity and Islam both come out of Judaism. All three of those religions pray to the same God. They're little facets on a different take, but it's all
a male God.
It's all the same God. It goes back to the same Old Testament book. And I feel so hopelessly inept of like, well, how do you ever, ideally there would be some sort of like, actually non-partisan group that could hold, but like it doesn't exist. I don't think, and I don't know how to make it happen. So, but I don't think there's any way to take it, especially, maybe I'm just speaking from the Jewish side, like the Zionists, Jews, that, it is intrinsic to their faith to live in the land of Israel.
And which
is also counter. There's plenty of other Jews that are like, if you
there's a lot of rabbis though and religious Jews who oppose Zionism.
Right.
And so, but there's also a lot of Christians who support it, because there's something is when the Holy Land is returned to the Jews, then Jesus is going to come back. So, and that's another thing. It's all based on myths.
Right.
It's like me saying, I'm not going to go to the South because there's a giant that's, what was that giant's name that had Babe the Blue Ox?
Mm-hmm.
And, just like stupid, like that, just stupid. Can I say shit? Stupid.
Yeah.
And so, but another thing is that I don't like to call Palestinians terrorists, because I believe that occupied, oppressed people have a right to resist. And so I believe they're more like, it's more the resistance. And so if there's any part of the side that's committing terrorism. I think it's the Israeli side, because they are actually actively, and I can only, I think, criticize Israel because I criticize my own the country I live in for being an occupational, destructive force around the world. And Israel is concentrating on its land, where it's not the Israeli land, but Palestine is concentrating on that. It has bombed Lebanon and Syria, particularly since this started. But the United States spreads its cancer all over the world. And so, and see, when you see people who think Israel is worse than the United States, you know that they hate Jews, because there's no comparison to what Israel does and what the United States does. What Israel does is atrocious on a smaller scale than what the United States does. So that's and this is, you called it patriarchy. And I started thinking, when my son was killed in Iraq in 2004, we didn't have the complete story about what happened to him yet. And I don't even know if we're going to ever get the truth about what exactly happened to Casey. But I put blame on George Bush, Dick Cheney. We've already mentioned Condoleezza Rice, Colin Powell, and of course the Democrat warmongers like Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden and all those people who promoted the war in Iraq. And I think Raytheon, Boeing, all of those, the Pentagon had the correct places to put my anger. But the one place I never put it was the people of Iraq. Is whoever fired the bullet that killed my son was only defending his community, right? He was, and I've gotten emails from Iraqis who say, "We're sorry, we don't hate you, we didn't hate your son, but we wanted the U.S. military out." And I understand that. That's something I understand, because if somebody tried to come and harm me or my children or grandchildren, I'd do the same thing. I would defend my community the same way that they defended their community. And so that's a different kind of what I call matriotism, is having love for all people, not just the people of your country, which is patriotism, matriarchy, patriotism, patriarchy. And, patriarchy is hegemonic, it's withdrawn, it's inward. Matriotism is outwards. It's loving all of humanity, not just your family or because where you're born is an accident. It's just like random. You could be born anywhere to anybody. And so just to love this geographic area, to me, seems very backwards.
Oh, I agree. I feel like the whole premise in 1948 for setting up this Zionist state was setting up a region to be, something that it does, this
a powder keg. They set it up to be a powder keg.
Yeah.
Right. And, but, for the UN's credit, which I don't really want to give them too much credit, because it's like, to me, it's a diplomatic cover for U.S. imperialism, just like NATO is another arm of U.S. militarism. But anyway, the NATO has something like 250 resolutions against Israel for what they do. And they have been calling for an immediate ceasefire. And not just a temporary one, but at one. And there just can't be a ceasefire. There has to be reparations. They have to tear down that wall. It's against international law. People are trapped there. They're in prison. So to have a ceasefire in the north, tell everybody in this 25 by 5 25 mile by 5 mile slit of land to find somewhere else so you won't be bombed is absolutely freaking ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's sort of this impossible powder keg, like you said, that it's been, set up. I mean, I think like to something you said earlier that I, partially disagree with. I do think that there's a slippery slope, a sliding scale of, what is resistance and what I would consider terrorism. I do think that a lot of what Hamas does, I consider terrorism. But like, I also don't, I understand why they're doing it, but I think that.
How do we break this vicious cycle? Because that's what it is. It's my brother was killed by.
Right. An eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind.
Right. How do we stop that? How do we abolish war?
Girl, I don't know.
Well, I mean, you have to give
all the warmongers.
You have to give the people some kind of hope and some kind of, something to look forward to. Is like, what are the people of Gaza? Hamas is a creation was created after the wall came up. And what would you do? What would you do if you were trapped in an open air prison? I wouldn't just go, oh, God bless my captors. I would be fighting for my children and my grandchildren, because I'm not a pacifist, but I'm against imperial war. I'm anti-imperialist. I'm against colonialism. I'm against occupation. It's almost like going to what Thistle is alluding at. It's almost like the military-industrial complex created Israel. Because not only is it a powder keg, it's a gold mine for the military-industrial complex. And so, and then that was interesting because after the creation of Israel, and the general, who is also a war criminal, Eisenhower, became president of the United States, when he left after 8 years of mostly playing golf, he warned us of the growth of the military-industrial complex. And so I also am a historian. I majored in U.S. history at UCLA. And so before, like I was talking about, before World War I, the conflicts were mostly combatants. Less than 2% of the people killed were civilians. Now, I think it's like 98%. I think that has reversed itself, correct? But then World War I, look at the vast, that's right between World War I and World War II is when Smedley Butler wrote War is a Racket. That's when vast, immoral, illegal, unethical profits were made by the war machine. And then many of those same profiteers, this is like a history lesson, supported Hitler's rise and then World War II happened. So they're not about to give up their gravy train, right? So since then, we've had nonstop, our tax dollars and our nation's resources have gone nonstop to supporting these few people in this most destructive, disgusting business, the war machine. And so I think that might, if they didn't create this Israel-Palestine conflict, they're certainly benefiting from it and capitalizing on it.
That's one of the problems. I think that the people, I feel like these outside forces, the U.S. and the other countries that are sticking their hand in to help have just as much. I think the United States is just as much a stake in continuing the conflict as it purports to say, oh, we really want to stop this. I don't think the U.S. does want to stop it.
No, it's been going on ever since 1948 in some form or another. And it's almost like a dystopic sci-fi novel. It's like the war, and it's in the Holy Land, and it's an end of the world kind of type apocalyptic.
Well, and not even since 1948. I mean, people have been conquering that city of Jerusalem for thousands of years.
Yeah. It's been under.
We destroyed a temple. We built another temple. Somebody else destroyed it. They built a mosque.
Okay, well, that's a long ass time, and it's
it's all men's war and it's all men's religion.
How do
I see it?
Well, I think we do, obviously, because we're WLRN and we have a feminist analysis, and so we see that men are the perpetrators, the inventors, the primary inventors of this war machine, and they train primarily other men, though Israel trains some women in.
Well, and the U.S. does too. The U.S., but you're right. It is a overwhelmingly masculine, energy.
Right, and it's taking that propensity that women have, men have in some of us, that to be violent, and it's training that instead of that innate propensity that we all have, that I think you were talking about earlier, Cindy. Instead of fostering that and training us to love one another, we're being trained to hate one another, and it's just gone on and on and on. And I just wish we had some kind of concrete solution. And I feel like it's related to women having power, but real power, not the kind of power that is power over and a power based on squashing others, but that power that you feel when you are with your family and you're feeling joyful and you're all singing, you get to be around the fire together. That's powerful. How can we move from this power over smashing paradigm that's patriarchal into one that is nurturing the loving side in every human being, regardless of their sex? How can we move towards that?
Well, that's a great question, because it's certainly, like we've talked about, is that the religious aspect of this conflict, and religions are supposed to be, peaceful. And, that's just a joke. And so the whole mythology of war and religion and everything is Orwellian, actually, when you think about it. And so I've had not as long as some people, to my regret, but since my son was killed, almost 20 years of activism and writing and thinking and doing. And what I really think needs to happen is that I've come to the conclusion that the forces at play against us are pretty overwhelming. And so I think that a local movement where, like somebody in the chat said, not in your head lesbian in the chat said, we have to create the solution. How about centering food versus land? And I think centering community, centering healthy things like organic food, community gardens, community food, schooling, getting the community involved in raising our children. I know some of my colleagues who were in peace activism have created programs for elementary schools on peace. Why don't we have peace programs, and why don't we teach peace studies instead of U.S. history? Like I told you, I majored in U.S. history. It's a history of war and white men. That's all it is. It's war and white men, the whole time, until you get into upper division. Then you learn about other aspects of U.S. civil society. So I think doing more local things, and we can't really say that we can abolish war by doing that, because I'm sure the people of Gaza, they don't choose to be in this war, and there might be a war happen that we don't choose for ourselves either. The way the U.S. has been going, there could be active bombing here, the way the administration is happening right now. So I think we need to choose each other. And if we have these communities of care that we try to grow, which I'm trying to grow here in my own little way, trying to foster that, is that they can become connected, like a ground, like a gentle breeze across the continent, instead of like this facing it up head on, because they they have all the weapons, and that would be another David and Goliath thing. I don't know if I'm making sense, but your friend Not in Your Head Lesbian says communities of care, absolutely. And then the more we become self-sufficient with each other, and I'm not saying isolationism at all. Human beings need each other, right? And so we need positive interactions with other human beings. Is that we need that? I think that has to be the way to go. Until, if we spread across and there's no more room to spread, then we have to go up and just start, eliminating the way that the people here in this, and it's not just about the leadership in this country, but because they've done a brilliant job of propaganda and miseducating us to believe that the United States is the greatest country that has ever been, and I wrote a book, and if people subscribe to my Substack with a paid subscription, I give the book free. It's called Myth America, the 20 Greatest Myths of the Robber Class and the Case for Revolution. And so the first thing we have to do is dispel these myths. We are a country, but we're not great. No country has a right to exist. This country has committed many crimes. This country has a lot of karma. But if we start healing ourselves and our families and communities, we have to do that before we can even address the karma deficit this country has, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely.
If this country died tomorrow, I'm sure it would go to hell. And so I'm really, I mentioned that I was not sad when Kissinger passed away.
I couldn't even believe he was still alive.
Oh no, he was still alive.
I was genuinely saw that news, and I was like, I thought he was dead
still
already.
alive, and he had his disgusting fingers in the pie of U.S. imperialism.
Oh my gosh, there's just so much here, right? Like I've been studying. People have primarily labeled it as leftist grassroots community organizing, localism, regionalism, bioregionalism, organizing in your own community, creating that revolution, that gentle breeze that you're talking about going across the country because people in their local communities are growing their own food and building relationships with one another in a community of care. And to me, there's a lot of feminism in that. I think in that vision. I think that women hold that vision and are the grassroots organizers in our communities for the most part. I also think it's the bombs are stronger. I hate that. I don't want that to be so, which I think goes to your point of being a peace activist, but not a pacifist, in that we need to grow our own food, but there might come a time if we're literally having bombs raining down on us that we would have to organize a resistance and use violence. I mean, like what we saw with like the Zapatistas, for example, which I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and that was a very powerful grassroots movement that inspired me to a vision of a caring community, a civil society that is resisting and defending itself because it has to, but that greening of the society, creating that ethic of care is a big part of it too, and I think the only way that we're going to be able to really spread that around is if women, and not the Margaret Thatchers of the world, but if that women have to, somehow we need to shift the power so that women as a group collectively have power. Right now, it just seems like, whether you're in Israel or you're in Palestine, woman is the second-class citizen still. She is still the subordinate, and that has to change, I think, before we're actually going to get to that ethical, that community of care that you're illustrating for us, Cindy.
Well, I think that what we're talking about is very subversive, but what I think that we have to stop asking men, and we have to stop asking the system for permission to do stuff. We just need to do it. I think that we just have to just do these things, and the reason why men are so oppressive against women or males and females, however you want to say, is because they know how powerful we are.
Yeah.
And they know that, and I think it was Emily who said, or I don't know which one, who said that in China, mothers bind the feet of their children. We have to get away from that, is thinking that we're lower class citizens. We have to get our power and not allow our daughters or other young women to be abused in those ways. So I think maybe our movement can start today. The women gathering together for communities of care.
This is WLRN.
WLRN.
Women's Liberation Radio
Women's
News.
Liberation Radio
Women's
News.
Liberation Radio
Women's
News.
Liberation Radio News. This month, we're discussing the war in Israel and Gaza. While there are many ongoing conflicts in the world, including in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, China, Darfur, and Ukraine, among far too many others, we are focusing on this one because of the global attention and the glaring absence in the media of those who bear the greatest burden: women. Over the last 2 months, much has been said about the conflict in Israel and Gaza. Marked by decades of tension, there have been profound and far-reaching consequences on the lives of those caught in its crossfire. And as with most conflicts, women in particular find themselves facing unique challenges and hardships. For that reason, the plight of women and children on both sides are the main concern for us here at WLRN. How can we ensure that they live in a world that treats them with dignity and respect and without fear? How do we navigate reporting on a war that is so divisive and complex and mired in centuries of conflict? And how do we guarantee that the voices of Gazan and Israeli women are heard and their stories understood? One way is to share them here, with the acknowledgement that there are so many stories that have yet to be told, and even more that never will, because in war, women's suffering is collateral damage. The primary perpetrators of the war and destruction we see in Israel and Gaza are men, be they from Israel, Gaza, Iran, the United States, Russia, or elsewhere. With politics playing out on local and global scales, families are torn apart, leaving women as the primary caregivers for children, elderly family members, and the wounded. The toll of such loss and displacement is immeasurable, with women often grappling with grief, anxiety, sexual assault, pregnancy, and post-traumatic stress. In Gaza, pregnant women are forced to deliver without water, electricity, or proper medical equipment, putting themselves and their infants at risk of injury and death. With an estimated 50,000 pregnant women in Gaza and 180 babies born every day, conditions are dire, and many women have given birth in shelters or even under debris following airstrikes. After a brief truce at the end of November, during which Israeli hostages and Gazan prisoners were released, the fighting resumed, with Israel ordering civilians in southern Gaza to evacuate. As of the first week in December, the death toll in Gaza has exceeded 15,000 people, and with the renewed fighting, that number will only increase. And survivors grapple with displacement, as around 1.8 million people, which is 80% of the population, has been forced to evacuate their homes. Displacement is common in time of war and puts women at increased risk of sexual assault from enemy combatants and from men who are supposedly on their side. Women are thus facing a battle on multiple fronts and are not even safe among those who claim to fight for the rights of their communities. In war zones more broadly, combatants often commit an alarming increase in sex-based violence, with women and girls facing heightened risks of abuse and exploitation. The Israel-Gaza conflict is no exception, and concerted efforts are needed to address and prevent sex-based violence. Legal frameworks that protect women's rights must be enforced, both at the national and international levels. Human rights organizations must monitor and document instances of sex-based violence, advocating for justice and pressing for policy changes that prioritize the safety and well-being of women, regardless of religion or ethnicity. This is where the media, protesters, academics, and human rights organizations have fallen short. Around the world, and indeed in Gaza and Israel, anti-Semitic and anti-Muslim rhetoric is often employed to rally people around a certain stance. In both the UK and the US, for example, the rate of bigoted attacks on Muslim or Jewish men, women, and children have increased since October 7th. People not directly impacted by the war, such as those in Western countries, approach these conversations as if they were talking about sports teams, ignoring that real people are suffering and losing their lives. This also extends to justifying the actions of Hamas on October 7th, which included the rape and brutalization of Israeli women, as inevitable or even deserved. In Canada, the director of the Sexual Assault Centre of the University of Alberta endorsed an open letter calling for a ceasefire, but also denied that Hamas militants committed sexual assault on October 7th. While the director has since been fired, the rape and torture of Israeli women during the massacre on October 7th has been minimized or simply ignored by individuals and organizations around the world who think that because Gazans are oppressed by Israel, the actions of Hamas were justified. Women, regardless of where they live or the communities in which they belong, never deserve to be raped or brutalized by men. Such acts are not examples of freedom fighting, but are instead crimes against humanity. Gazan and Israeli women alike deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, with access to proper medical care and shelter. In the midst of the current conflict, which is another chapter in a war that has plagued communities since the mid-20th century, the humanity of the women on both sides must not be forgotten.
Thanks for listening to WLRN's 92nd edition podcast. Merry, merry, and ho, ho, ho from the elves here at WLRN. WLRN would like to thank our guest this month for sharing her views on the war in the Middle East. Thank you so much, Cindy Sheehan, for speaking with us. Until next time, this is Thistle signing off.
If you like what you are hearing and would like to donate to the cause of feminist community radio, please visit our WordPress site and click on the donate button. Check out our merch tab to get a nice gift in exchange for your donation. And if you're interested in joining our team, we are always looking for new volunteers to conduct interviews, write blog posts, post to our Facebook and other social media pages, do audio editing, and any other tasks to keep us moving forward as a collective of media activist women. Thanks for listening. This is Jenna signing off for now.
And I'm Sekhmet Yael. Thanks for tuning in. Next month, we will focus our program on looking back at 2023 and ahead to 2024 with Joe Brew of WDI International. Our handcrafted podcasts always come out the first Thursday of the month, so look for it on Thursday, January 4th, 2024. If you'd like to receive our newsletter that notifies you when each podcast, music show, and full-length interview are released, please sign up for our newsletter on the WLRN WordPress site at WLRNmedia.com. Keep fighting male power. Thanks for listening.
This is Mary, signing off in another edition of WLRN's monthly handcrafted podcast. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Spinster, Overit, and SoundCloud, in addition to our WordPress site. Thanks for listening.
And this is Emily. Our monthly podcasts are always crafted with tender loving care and in solidarity with women worldwide. Thanks so much for your support. We would love to hear from you, so please share, like, and comment widely.
But how will we find our way out of this? What is the antidote for the patriarchal kiss? How will we find what needs to be shown? And then after that, where is home? Tell me, where is my home? 'Cause gender hurts.